and welcome to UNCAGED, a show celebrating thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the world of commerce tomorrow. Today we have Mark Kapczynski. How are you, Mark?
Hey, man, what's happening?
So we've got Mark Kapczynski. Mark is the CMO of Guten. Guten is a globally distributed production and logistics company, transforming the way online brands manufacture and fulfill merchandise to their customers. I've known Mark for, I don't know how long, probably at least a decade now, Mark. And
More than that, man. More than that.
Oh, you're aging me here. You're aging me.
Both of us, brother.
But Mark has been an innovator for several companies. He's recently created another company called Screen Sitters. It's such a long list of new businesses that he started and has been literally on the leading edge of for years and years. And so I'm really excited to talk to you, Mark, about what you're doing with Guten, as this company seems to be really moving forward rapidly, and also how that integrates in with some of the other innovative stuff that you've been working on. So as a way to start, why don't we just talk about you a little bit and about your career to date, where you came from and how you got here?
Yeah, so I had the logical career path to becoming a CMO. I started out as a film student at UCLA, worked in the entertainment industry, worked at Microsoft, did a venture-backed startup, and ended up at Experian, the credit bureau. Of course, the logical trajectory for all film students. And really came to learn about data. And one of our brands at Experian was freecreditreport.com, that maybe a lot of folks may recall or remember. And that was a very successful business for us. And I just learned so much there about data and customer acquisition and direct response marketing. And so that really stayed with me. And then, as I followed on to work at companies like Yodlee in the fintech space, and then did some consulting work, even with Hart Hanks and other places that we've collaborated on over the years. And it's been fun to now be here at Guten, where it feels like all of those different things and different disciplines that I've had through my years have come together, and it's really fun to be working, with the team there, and Brian Rainey, our CEO, who you introduced me to, of course. It's just on such a great trajectory, and it's fun to be building something with scale, and it's just super cool. It's such a great opportunity. So thank you for it.
Yeah, and tell me a little bit more about Guten and what attracted you to Guten to be part of this team that's pushing it forward.
Yeah, well, maybe funny enough, when I was graduating film school, kind of in the early days of the internet, the first business I actually set up was an e-commerce platform where, funny enough, back in the early to mid 90s, you could sell products on the internet. Very, Yahoo stores at the time was kind of a comparison. Now it would be Shopify and Big Commerce. And so I actually had built a business like that and sold that off in the early days. And so it's kind of weird how I've had this like relationship with e-commerce through my whole career. So whether it was building a platform, or when I went to work for Microsoft, it was helping the entertainment industry sell media, like streaming media or downloadable music or downloadable movies in an e-commerce model. And then, from there, working, with Experian, where we were selling free credit reports. Probably shouldn't have been doing that. Guess you're not supposed to sell free. But e-commerce has just been in my blood, I think, in this indirect way. And so the opportunity to, work with data, work with a high growth startup, work in e-com, especially right now where you're just seeing so much growth. This was, such a great, exciting opportunity.
And honestly, I think, and obviously I know you and I know Brian and your team. What a great team you guys have built there. I mean, I obviously see the critical relevance of what Guten does in the world that we live in today, and certainly during the COVID world, where e-commerce and digital commerce and managing that whole process is becoming the lifeblood for all of us, actually keeping us all
Yeah.
going and sane, and certainly seems like it's become the thread to the future. I mean, when you think about why the business is important today and going forward, what
Yeah.
what comes to mind?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that you're going to see from Gooden championing this year, 2021. We even have Brian speaking on a panel about this in a couple weeks, which is um, the fashion industry, or the fashion and apparel industry. And what I mean by that is, here's an industry that has been built and predicated on like producing bulk inventory at tremendous volumes and just tremendous waste, and using chemical dyes and non-organic, cotton and other substances to produce clothing, and the wastefulness of how much water it takes to produce one T-shirt. I think, when you see a business like Gooden as a platform, uh, we have such an amazing opportunity to help reshape the fashion and apparel industry to take advantage of this new supply chain model of on-demand manufacturing. Basically, only manufacture exactly what you're selling, and so you don't have all the careless waste that is being produced today. And just as a whole, it improves the economics for the fashion industry. So here you don't have to outlay thousands or millions of dollars in bulk inventory that, I don't know if you know, but the stat is over 40% of all the fashion industry apparel that gets produced goes into a landfill.
Wow.
40% out of
Wow.
a this multi billion dollar industry. 40% just goes to waste. It's like, well, why did you need to produce that in the first place, right? use
Yeah,
on de- use on demand.
I it really kind of builds on what companies, I guess, like Zara and others with the fast fashion movement have been trying to build for a while, but really kind of taking it, I would say, to definitely the next level. And
Yeah.
I think eliminating that waste is
Yeah.
absolutely key.
Yeah. Well, every fashion brand right now is either thinking about or trying to understand what to do with a like sustainability story. And one of the biggest things is stop producing in bulk is
Mm.
a big contributor to that, right? And so if we can be a part of a business's or a brand's story for sustainability, obviously it helps us and helps them. I'll give you one
I don't
instance.
know what it'll mean for the outlet
Yeah.
malls. I guess my wife
Well,
that
they're
loves.
already gone anyway, so like, who goes to the mall anymore?
Absolutely. So Mark, I mean, as you
Yeah,
guys are moving forward, I know that you and I've spoken, and Guten has hired extremely quickly, and it has
yeah,
accelerated its growth. In that type of an environment, what are the challenges that you're seeing and facing on a day-to-day basis?
yeah. I mean, what's funny is like I haven't met my own team in person, so I've hired a whole marketing team, since I started last year, and I haven't met any of them in person. Right?
That's
I had to
amazing.
just hire
That's
them all from scratch, and like we don't all even live in the same city, so even to bring us all together now would require flights and so on, and we're not doing that. And even to that level, all my teammates at the executive level at Gooden, I haven't met them either. Obviously I know Brian, the CEO, from prior to COVID and so on, and Maddie and the CFO, uh, but that's it. I haven't met anyone else, and so that alone
yeah.
has presented a challenge. And I think the biggest thing, especially for me, I consider myself more of a creative person in general. And I love being in front of a whiteboard and being in a much more dynamic, creative brainstorming environment with my team. And we have not found really any good way to replicate that. It's very it's very forced, right? Like even conversations over Zoom, as you know, it's like I talk, I have to then wait, you talk, like there isn't like a consistent banter because you then can't hear each other, right? So
Yeah.
if we were all in one room, you could have more of that energy of like, okay, you go, you go, you go, and like, you're updating a whiteboard and figuring stuff out, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I don't even think, we've tried lots of tools to try to help us, but nothing, a tool doesn't replace that dynamic environment.
Yeah, yeah. It's. I think yeah, I've seen this certainly with my own business. Innovation is one of the areas that will have to be developed a lot more in this virtual structure. I would
Yeah,
say that innovation for efficiencies is at an all-time high. I would imagine that
right. Yeah,
business is
totally.
probably more efficient than it's ever been, right?
Yeah.
But
But it's
I'm,
short-sighted, man, right? It's very like great. That's all the tactics for things we have to do this quarter we can figure out, right? And like we're like you said, super efficient. But like if you're doing strategic planning on like what are the strategic initiatives for this year that we should agree to, man, it's so hard to get through all that. And it's a lot of like, well, let me work on my portion of the deck and then we'll send it around and then we'll do like self-analysis, and like there isn't, group discussion.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I also think that there's that interesting separation where you're trying to build trust, right? So you have trust because you know Brian, you know your
Yeah.
core leadership team, but you're building new trust with all these new folks. And how do you go through that process? And it's a fascinating thing. I had a situation today where I was working with a client who they had been using one communications platform and suddenly they'd switched over to Slack. And so suddenly it was kind of like one of those things where half the dialogue and conversation was happening in Google Hangout, and half the conversation was happening in another
Oh,
platform.
that's the worst. Yeah, then
And I was
factor
like,
like
this,
email and everything else, right? And
yeah.
Confluence and comments in Google Sheets and stuff. I mean,
We got a long way to go still. I also do think that I've been in our office in Europe, and they're coming into the office. I think there's just a lot of learning that you get from that being in the same
yeah,
space. So
yeah.
we'll see how it all plays out in the end. But
Well,
when you
like,
think, Mark, oh, go ahead, go ahead.
oh no, I was just going to final note on that. Yeah, I was talking with my team even this week because we had a little mini strategy session, and it was like the things that we're covering today, like we would have already covered because like I would have come out of a meeting with Brian or another team member, and like you guys would all be near me, and I would have just like updated you and stuff, right? So like my strategy session this week, we had a 3-hour strategy session. Half of it was just catching the team up to speed on all the conversations over the last couple weeks to get them up to speed on everything that has been thrown my way, and
Yeah.
and so on, that normally would have been disseminated much faster.
Good times. All good learning. All good learning. But listen, I mean, being part of a company like Guten, there's a lot of good things too. I mean,
Yeah,
what gives you joy right now from what you guys are working on?
yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is just the sheer opportunity. There's so much, you know, greenfield opportunity in front of us, and the fun part for me is how do we build ourselves up to go get that, right? There's so many different things we could do. Which ones should we do? And then how do we start making the strides to go do it, right? We know what the low hanging fruit is, the kind of the tactical things that we should be doing, right, and executing on that. But then it's these strategic things like we were describing in the fashion industry, right? We may not see a lot of early business from those efforts, like Q1, Q2 of this year. But like if we don't start making, the progress or sowing the seeds for that right now, as those things mature later this year and into next year, we won't be ready. So it's like, the fun part is like like I always like being on the front edge, as you probably know, of things. So it's like, how do we go take the beach and like, let's go get those first wins and get the first deals in that tee up the rest of the business. And so for me, the fun part is that, like, I don't know, mental chess match of like, okay, what are the different things we should be doing? Which
Yeah.
beaches do we go storm Normandy on, kind of thing, and go
Yeah.
get those early wins?
I love that description. It's truffle hunting, looking for those veins of gold that you don't know if it's going to be a really big vein, but you're
Right.
exploring it. But it's critical for any company, especially one that's growing as fast as you guys, to
Yeah.
explore those channels and see where that next big vein of gold is going to be. So I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that. And I would say that as the world is moving forward, one of the constants I think we can all see is that e-commerce is not going away. That we're not. There's no rush, as you mentioned. All the malls have already gone out of business. There's no rush back to the big shopping mall. But how do you
Right.
see
Right.
things evolving in this space going forward? What's your hope for the future?
Um, wow. I think there's just a lot of there's just so many moving pieces that I think you need, I guess, some form of, some people like the term, some people don't, like consolidation of all of this, because there's just too many moving parts and too many of everything now in e-commerce. Like a good example is just going to the Shopify app store, and like even in our category called print on demand, I mean, you'll find 50 or 100 providers,
Wow.
right? And like, there's varying levels, right? There's probably two or three of us, three of us probably realistically, that are viable, and then but there's so much clutter there that it's like the shakeout hasn't occurred yet, right? It's
Right.
like everyone, like it's funny, I'm advising a little startup that's trying to get into the analytics space for Shopify sites, and it's like, I was like, dude, like, there's like only 1,000 other companies doing that right now. So it's like, how do you plan to be different? It's
Yeah.
like, are your analytics better than someone else's Shopify analytics? So it's like, what are you bringing uniquely to the table? And I think that's the big thing right now, is just there's so many different tools out there and so many different plugins, and like, how many different CDP platforms can we hear about, and so on, right? And you know new marketing automation things, and like, it's just that clutter, I think, is difficult, and I think consolidation and bringing that down to some, probably some new companies that then exist out of that consolidation,
Well, there you go.
to
Maybe you guys
make it
need to
easier.
acquire a whole bunch of
Yeah,
these guys. We'll see how that all evolves going
got to go
forward.
raise some real private equity money to go do that.
That's great. Well, listen, I mean, Mark, thank you so much for
Yeah,
taking the time to
of
talk to us
course.
today. I'm loving watching the journey that you're on, as well as Guten. Mark Kapczynski, Chief Marketing Officer of Guten. Guten is a globally distributed production and logistics company transforming the way online brands manufacture and fulfill merchandise to their consumers. Go check it out. They're super helpful for players in the e-commerce space. Thank you so much, Mark, for joining us. That's Uncaged. We're giving a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the world of commerce tomorrow. Mark, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. I'm a
All right.
wave.
All right. Talk to you soon.
See you,
Bye.
Pat. Thanks. Bye.